So real quick, everybody, this is the Smart Cities Forum 2021 for the World Green Growth Summit. Thank you, Alejandra, and the opportunity to be a moderator for this particular panel. I will be handling the transportation segment, which, as we all know, is a very important component into how we get around in this country. And with that, the changes that are coming to this segment. So for those of you who don't know my background, 30 years with Southern California Edison, 15 of those in government affairs, and the rest of it, and pretty much the latter part of my career in literally senior project managing, energy compliance, and senior advisor roles. So with that, I had an opportunity to go work for the Department of Energy as a senior advisor for the Office of Economic Impact. And today I have an opportunity to be part of this great program. So with that, I'm going to keep my part short so we can actually get into more dialogue. I'm going to start my first speaker with Mike Burrows, who's the Chief Executive Officer and President for the San Bernardino International Airport. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike, because you have a lot that's going on over there. And I want to make sure we all touch on all of those exciting things you're doing.
Great. No, thank you all for having us today. I just want to introduce my colleague here, our marketing manager, Amber Casares, who is my wing woman on these most recent efforts, particularly in this exciting space. On behalf of the global airport community, though, we really appreciate the opportunity to engage with experts such as yourselves. And from an airport perspective, we are really working to try to grow how we continue to change our business and how work gets done in aviation. And there's an old saying in airports: if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. And that's true. It really is in so many ways, because each airport has a role to play. And we all try to do our best to compare notes and share best practices. But how you adapt these emerging technologies on your airport is really your responsibility to the air transportation system. So as many will talk about, airports aren't always associated with being early adopters of emerging technologies, even though a lot of us think we are. But if you think about aviation, though, when it had its roots, guess what? It was an emerging technology, and people had to adapt to it. So the art of flight itself, emerged from brand new technology and people trying new things, and we really embrace that. But we have to, particularly in the airport environment, try to stay focused but flexible. And so, our message, I think, in the journeys that we've had, is to be adaptable, and that's tough in highly regulated industries and transportation, particularly aviation and airports. But for us, what made that a little more challenging was the fact that we were once an Air Force base and had to rebuild and imagine that entire city within cities. And that really is akin in the green energy space from moving from what was a super fun site to how we can now, after we've rebuilt the entire footprint a couple of times actually, incorporate some of the latest on-airport green technologies. So we've got a couple of slides, quick ones here, that talk about some of the spaces we've been working in. And again, we've got a lot more that we want to do and a lot more I think we can do, but we'll share the next slide here with you. So as I mentioned, we were once a military base, and this military base had a very important airport asset, and thankfully our airport is still here. But a lot of that had to be commercialized. And when I say commercialized, we had to bring it up to code, not just federal standards, but everything around it. And as we did, we were able to really get a good inventory of our energy footprint, and having to reconstruct almost everything, not quite. You learn where everything is the hard way. Right. And sometimes those are the best lessons, especially when you're able to integrate some new technologies. But we also had to be respectful of the environment throughout that whole process. And a few people know this in the industry, but we actually have of all things, wildlife conservation management area right adjacent to our main runway. And wow. We actually have 220 acres of carefully managed and protected endangered species habitat. And we have had since we transitioned from the military environment to the commercial use airport that we are today. So where we started several years ago, of course, is when we reconstruct our campus and our airport environment with our facilities, our buildings, our terminals. We've always raised the bar to try to adhere to the most then applicable energy conservation standards. Of course, LEED being the most widely known one now. And we have a number of our main centralized buildings that are LEED certified to this day. And as we do others, we continue to raise the bar and look how we can do that. It's a common sense approach when you look at saving energy over the long run. And while we did that, we of course looked at where can we incorporate photovoltaic technology. And as Jerry and others have heard over the years, we've been through what I call solar 1.0, maybe 1.5, and we're working on whichever generation we are now. But it's important, and that technology, even 10 plus years ago, is operating to this day. So that's a testament to show that this can and does work. But what that is connected to also has to be taken into consideration. And so, like many airports around the world, we were very fortunate because we were able to completely upgrade our airfield lighting systems to LED and more energy efficient technologies. And that's been a real lifesaver when you look at your utility bills, which again, on an airport can be sizable. And then most recently, we've re-engaged on alternatively fueled vehicles, both hybrid and full electric. We really are excited to hear from our partners on hydrogen opportunities. We think that has a role to play. And our ground support equipment, so the tugs, the baggage belts, and the things you see scurrying around your commercial aircraft across the world. We were very, very early on in incorporating fully electric versions of that, and just added to our fleet recently again this year. So every time we upgrade and upgauge, we're going after the latest available electric technology that is out there. And then the other, maybe more less known fact is supporting our businesses here on airport includes a lot of aircraft maintenance, not just air cargo and commercial activity. And one of those companies actually recycles and reconditions aircraft and sells those parts worldwide. So from a consumption standpoint, we're really excited to have partners like that really think outside the box when it comes to what can be done with large commercial airframes that they just safely fly and support the flying public. The most recent project this year that was open is an air cargo air hub for Amazon Air, which incorporates the most recent and available green energy technology, everything you would expect from photovoltaic and fully electric ground support equipment this facility has. And it is the Southern California Air Hub, which is an amazing complement for us to our partners that put us on the map, UPS and FedEx, just a few years ago. And lastly, of all things you think you wouldn't be doing in a pandemic year in 2020, we launched a really exciting new UAS drone training and certification center right smack dab in the middle of our commercial airport. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So if we could go to the next slide real quick. This is our latest chapter in photovoltaic. So airports, there are areas on an airport where you can do photovoltaic, and there's airports where you ought not to do it, obviously, because of glare and impacts to pilots and other surfaces. But that's not to say they can't be done, and many airports have. And so a lot of our current photovoltaics are tied to, again, terminals and off-air field buildings. And this newest project, which we just completed conceptual design on it, is actually a story within a story. So what you see there is about 29 acres of what used to be a landfill for the military, which we carefully, cooperatively, put an asphalt cap on, and it's being utilized to, facilitate consolidated, logistics parking. But the slopes of that actually can accommodate about 3 megs of solar that can feed into the grid right here on airport. And so we're really motivated with this project to get this moving, and our utility partners with Southern California Edison and others are working side by side with us. So this one I hope to have a lot more progress on here in the coming months because it's a very unique opportunity for us, and not many spaces on a commercial airport can do this like this. So and then last but not least, on that UAS drone front, the center that we started, the reason I'm really bullish on this is we not only train and certify pilots to use drones right here on a commercial airport to really showcase and promote safe and proper drone flight, not just on an airport, near an airport, but in a metropolitan area. But our pilots include our very own operations officers, and they, for the past year, have been actually using drones to do their daily work, inspections, wildlife detections, pavement analyses. And guess what? That means they're not driving vehicles all around the airport to and from. And we're really expanding that in future years and focusing in on how we can also help public safety and other partners in the global industry. So we're doing our part as best we can, and it's a lot to keep up with because a whole lot of smart people around the world are coming up with new and better ideas, and we're just happy to be at the table. So again, thanks for having us here at SBD, and really appreciate all of you and the great work you're doing.
Well, thank you, and thanks for joining us. And with that, Laura, thank you for joining us. And don't worry, everything is all good. We had you going last as part of the presentation, and so with that, glad you could join us. So I'm going to now go to Doran Barnes, who's the CEO of Foothill Transit. So with that, Doran, I'm going to turn it over to you and everything you're doing in your world, especially on the Smart Cities transportation segment.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be with you all. And I had to chuckle a bit when with your opening, Mike, when you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. That's my line. When you've seen one transit agency, you've seen one transit agency. And I think that applies to so much of this. But there's a lot of great lessons that we can learn from each other, and a lot of great sharing. And really for Foothill Transit, that's really the center of where we've been. By way of background, Foothill Transit is the suburban transit operator in eastern Los Angeles County. We provide service throughout 22 cities in eastern Los Angeles County with connecting service into downtown Los Angeles. We do operate a fleet of 370 buses. They are all, with the exception of our electric buses, powered with renewable natural gas. So we have long been leaning into clean technologies and really are looking to continue to evolve that. Our zero emission story really goes back to 2010 when we introduced the first heavy duty fast charge electric buses into transit operation here in North America. And those were 3 vehicles. They operate on a local transit line, a very heavily used transit line. The beauty of those buses is that they can charge in less than 10 minutes. Average charge time is about 6.5 minutes on those buses. That's the good news. The bad news is those buses can only go about 40 miles in terms of range. So we charge those buses about every 2 hours. We can operate them literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as long as the grid is up and available, and have really been able to lean into that as a technology solution. We expanded that fleet in 2014. We started with 3, expanded that to 15 buses. And then in 2017, we added long-range buses, long-range electric buses that we charge overnight. Again, looking at the different technologies, the different approaches to using those technologies. And then more recently, behind me, you see our double-deck electric bus. This is the first double-deck battery electric bus to be introduced into transit service again here in North America. And we're just starting to get experience with this particular vehicle. Along the way, I think we've really learned that there are multiple aspects to making zero emission technology work. Part of it is the economic aspect of the program. Part of it is the operational aspect. And at the end of the day, our job is to get people where they need to go, to do it in the cleanest and most efficient way possible. But if we can't get people to their destination, or if the costs are extraordinary, we fail at our mission. And we really try to be very focused on the fact that our job is to move people, and again, to do that very smartly. If you go back to our first generation buses, the buses that charged every 2 hours, again, as a transit operator, we're used to using a lot of fuel to fuel our vehicles. Initially diesel fuel, moving on to CNG. Electric power has an entirely different kind of characteristic to it. And what we found with those fast charge buses is that operationally we could make it work. We can charge the buses every 2 hours. We did have to rewrite our schedules to make it happen. We can make that charging sequence happen. But one of the things that became very clear is that the way that grid-powered electricity is priced is entirely different than the way that CNG is priced. When we buy CNG, pretty much the price at 6 in the morning and 6 in the afternoon, more or less on the same day, it's pretty much the same price. If you think about electric power, though, the price at 6 in the morning when demand is low, the price is low. But if you go into the afternoon periods, you can see as much as an 8 to 10-fold swing in a period of 8 to 10 hours in pricing.
Right.
That for us becomes economically unsustainable. And so these are the kinds of lessons that we're learning as we experiment with these technologies, as we move these technologies forward. One of the other big challenges we face with our grid-powered fleet is range. And we don't have the same range on our overnight charge buses that we have on our traditional CNG buses. And so our next step on the journey is that we just literally last week placed the largest order to date of hydrogen fuel cell transit vehicles. Those will be arriving next summer. And one might say, well, are you giving up on grid power? No, we're not giving up on grid power. We think both hydrogen as a zero emission fuel and the grid as a zero emission fuel have a future. We really need to figure out, again, how do we balance the operational needs and the financial needs that allow us to carry out our mission. So the journey continues. There's certainly lots more to be learned, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Great. And I will add to that later on in discussion, because what a lot of people don't realize if you have a electric vehicle, for example, hey, they give you the range, but that's based on ideal circumstances, and it's not based on using the power windows and all the other electrical accessories that can drain the battery. So people realize that distance now becomes a shorter distance. And I don't want to name out any manufacturers. That's just the way it's done when it's usually done under ideal situations. They give you the average over that period of time, distance, but if you use all those other accessories that go with it, it just drains the batteries. And to
your point, Jerry, the long range buses that we bought had a nominal range of 258 miles, which pretty much gets all of our routes covered. The actual real world range is closer to 180.
Yeah.
So telling our customers, gee, at 4:30 in the afternoon, we're out of juice, we're done for the day, doesn't exactly get them home at the end of the workday if that's where they need to go.
No, and we'll get a little bit of that during discussion. So with that, I want to give some time to Laura Stadler, who is the CEO and president of Global Transition Bridge. So with that, she'll share a little bit on some of the areas she's been covering on the hydrogen front, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Laura.
Thank you, guys, and thanks for your patience. for my technical difficulties here in Texas, but I'm going to pull up my slides here. Let's see here.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to focus mainly, just on sake of time, on hydrogen as the bridge for today's energy, because it really forms a great capability to utilize today's success and today's infrastructure with what we need for tomorrow and for a long duration of resiliency. And so going into this, there's a lot of different applications for hydrogen. It acts as a bridge because it can be related to solar, wind, hydropower, to oil and gas, to, we can go and talk about offshore. We can get into any type of energy source, even nuclear, on ways that it can be valuable to really storing the different energies and being a long-term storage source for us to, again, provide that resiliency. And when it comes to investment, a lot of people, including governments, are really enjoying the hydrogen side of it. As you know, hydrogen's been around a long time, but it's become much more economic today. But it's also become more valuable because we've got much larger aircrafts and things that for both land, air, and for space and for sea. So looking at subsea technology and for going into space with everything happening, I feel like on a daily basis right now, it's been pretty exciting on the space front. But hydrogen is capable of going to deeper depths and going into colder environments and getting to be able to utilize, I guess, in outer space. I'm not an astronaut or anything, as much as I'd love to be, but it is something that we can utilize to possibly get home as a fueling source from Mars. And so they're looking at it as, okay, well, this is a 4-for-1 deal. It's a great investment for today. These are some of the projects happening more on my side. So I come from the oil and gas industry, as really trying to bridge them into this transition side and showing them what their value is in it. And the midstream has really seen the value and has really taken off, especially in the US, obviously around the world. But these are some of the blending projects happening currently with our pipeline system. And so these are small scale, yet large. And I say small because they're doing maybe 1% to 2% blends with the natural gas pipelines in different segments to begin that R&D so that they can eventually go into much larger corridors and be able to really bring that low carbon solution to more communities and more industrial capabilities as well, which is really exciting for the US. So hydrogen, again, it's able to utilize today's success. So by utilizing today's RNG for SMRs, steam methane reformers, to make the hydrogen, that's going to be a value to our renewable natural gas market and biogas market. It's going to help scale production by utilizing the natural gas that we have today. As much as it's considered the blue and the gray side, it's going to allow us to get to the volumes to make it more economic over time, so we can really focus on that green hydrogen side. And so the other part of it is that by utilizing today's midstream and today's applications and even the upstream for drilling, we can store CO2, we can store hydrogen. And those are very niche career spaces that we need those engineers, and we need those engineers to stay with us for a good amount of time so we can really create a more efficient and effective transition for a long duration. The other part is utilizing today's infrastructure with the permitting and regulations that it's already gone through, and being able to have more of a transfer of permits and a transfer of assets. And that's going to allow it to move much faster and also in a safe manner. Going into the blending, again, infrastructure, the existing infrastructure allows for the blending so we can get to more developments and more industrial zoning. It's safe transport. It's there. It's successful. It's proved to be safe in many aspects. And there's a lot of things that need to change too. But this is the time to utilize, for example, with the infrastructure bill, for remediation and resiliency, to upgrade these systems to meet the future needs. Power and utilities, utilizing today's natural gas power plants, can also blend, also go into 100% usage for hydrogen to really create, again, low carbon solutions. They have come through with technology that has advanced drastically, even in the last 10 years, to be able to do that. Currently, we'll get into this in the next slide, I believe, with the different turbines. The other part of it is that hydrogen is a good baseload power. When you have wind and solar, as we know, it kind of goes up and down. When we've got geothermal, you can't turn it off. And same with nuclear, where with natural gas, it's valuable because you can turn it on and off when needed. And so hydrogen will be that same value of being able to turn it on and off. We'll go ahead and get to the next slide. So today's needs, we are going to need more EV stations. We need to create jobs. We need to really work on not just jobs, but creating careers, resiliency, remediation, which we'll get into in a little bit, and also the cutting emissions. So hydrogen is able to really fuel each one of these categories when we're talking about the economics. So this is today's infrastructure with the natural gas pipelines. I find this interesting in a lot of conversations to show people kind of how this infrastructure is currently built and what can be utilized into the large developments as well communities and industrial clusters that we can utilize very quickly to really start that process of transition. These are already pipelines that have been researched on how much hydrogen can be utilized in the pipeline. So you can see that this is not just something new. This has been looked into for many, many years. So it is well thought out, not just a hype. And these are for the power generation side, GE and Siemens that have come out to say, look, our current turbines from A to K, they're able to go from 0 hydrogen to 15% today. Most of them are capable of doing 15 to 30% today. And with some tweaking over the next couple of years, they'll be able to go to 50% and eventually some of them 100% hydrogen, which is very exciting. So they don't have to necessarily buy the investment of going into fuel cells immediately. The infrastructure bill was a very big win, as we all know, bipartisan win, which is fantastic. They're going to be focused on ports, remediation, airports, resiliency, highways and bridges, and EV stations. And hydrogen can play a part in every single one of these categories to build it on more economically stable ways, and also in ways that will provide the EV market a stronger balance. Instead of relying on the grid, it can also rely on hydrogen, which we can get into a little bit. This is the hydrogen roadmap, just a quick view of it for you guys. This is what they're planning right now. When you look at the West Coast, they've really been able to build that out quite well. It's following the traditional interstate structure that they're going to try to start connecting the dots. But in order to connect the dots, we're going to need a lot of power and a lot of fuel. So we've got to, again, utilize that existing infrastructure, such as these highways that as they get upgraded, providing remote power for the upgrading and remediation, as well as providing the resiliency for that to be a stable market. And airports, I think, are one of the most exciting spots. And Jerry, am I good on time?
You can make it quick.
All right, really quick. Airports are probably one of the most exciting areas as potential hubs for hydrogen. There's already a few airports that are really focused on this here in the US, but especially internationally. Aviation alone is a huge economic benefit and value to our economy. And so by seeing that as a way to upgrade facilities and to bring in more jobs, careers, and really help on the cutting emissions, which is obviously one of the issues there. Hydrogen is a great capability, especially when it comes to the aviation technology. It'll start with the ground operations, which is a nice first scale, second scaling going to control towers and terminals, and then it'll be a full utilization even going into the planes themselves, which is going into like vertical takeoff, such as drones, and for the larger aircraft. So it provides a lot more of a foundation for these airports to grow into these futuristic ones that we've always thought about, which is pretty exciting. And we just need to work on changing the energy narrative, that it's okay to utilize this existing infrastructure and also okay to want to green it up. So that's the end.
Thank you, Laura. So with that, we have about 15 minutes of discussion, and I did want to bring up a couple key questions for each of you. And knowing what I know about each of you, I'm hoping that it'll be a lively discussion, basically. So with that, you know, I know, Doran, you touched on it a little bit. There's always an economic versus an operational impact to any of these technologies. So I'm going to start with you first. At some point, you had to analyze all of the various energy sources as you were building your fleet. How did you approach that for your particular industry? And then how did you weigh, okay, I've got to now, you know, I'm gonna invest 10% of my fleet into, you know, let's just go with the electric bus. When you did that, you had to come up with some percentage. There was some thought that went into that, and then, you know, how much you're going to go into hydrogen. So walk me through that process as you were looking at these various technologies.
Yeah, I think, Jerry, when we look at public transit, we're certainly not a true private actor, if you will, in the market space. We're a heavily subsidized industry. We're also a heavily regulated industry. So in part, the choices that we have before us were limited by the mandates of the California Air Resources Board. California Air Resources Board has mandated that transit operators move towards zero emission at the tailpipe vehicles. And so that really begins to then limit what our capabilities are on choice. Essentially, it's either grid-powered vehicles or hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Now, we're not at a point yet where that mandate has been fully in place, so we could continue to buy CNG-powered vehicles for a while, increasing the number of zero-emission vehicles, decreasing the number of CNG-powered vehicles. What we've done is lean in and aggressively gone after grant funding so that we can learn about these technologies to figure out how to make the best investments going forward. I can tell you that we've learned a lot. It's informed the investments that we're making going forward, but I'll also tell you that we still have a lot to learn. And so while we're committing to buy 33 hydrogen fuel cell buses, we've got to learn about that technology. We've got to see where that technology goes. And really, in many respects, the cost of hydrogen has to come down, or we're not going to be able to make future investments. Because right now, the economics of that hydrogen fuel cell program in and of themselves don't make any sense. If we don't learn about the technology, though, we're never going to get there.
Okay, so thank you. And I would add, the cost of energy, as you know, has gone up too. So, you know, buying electricity in the morning, as you indicated, and I'm going to use your words, it changes quite differently in the afternoon when it's when it's actually needed. And that's my former employer. So I got to walk that one a little delicately because they're all friends. So so with that, Mike, now that you've heard, you know, Doran, you have similar challenges where you're looking at various sources, energy sources, state-of-the-art technology to bring in. How are you looking at it holistically?
Well, it's similar to Doran. I guess we're all going back to school a little bit, which is good. That lifelong learning thing is not a bad deal. But most recently, we've really dug in, and Laura's presentation was a breath of fresh air for us, because a lot of, you know, go airports, because a lot of what she's talking about, we're actually working on locations on site where we can do a lot of that, and where it's located really matters, because like Doran, I'm heavily regulated, and equipment that rolls out on the airfield has to be certified for commercial use by the FAA, and we have this globally. But we're already using hydrogen vehicles at, for instance, our executive terminal. And so when pilots come in and need a vehicle to get to and from, you know, their destinations, we already have that here on site. What we'd like to do is see where we can get, you know, actual on-site charging, because our partner that operates the vehicles with us actually trucks in the hydrogen currently, but we have been talking with them and others about, okay, how can we really stand something up unique here? Because thankfully, we've got a little bit of real estate close by that can accommodate this, which is surrounded by, obviously, grids of grids. And that's the more recent foray in this space. But going back to our UAS center, we've already done demos with partners on a variety of clean tech drones. Obviously, ours are all electric, but there are hydrogen drones out there. Laura, you know a lot of them, I'm sure. And that creates some really exciting payload opportunities, particularly in the heavy lift space, which is very much, here and now. But again, as certifications become more available, we're here to exhibit, demonstrate it, test it, and be part of the discussion. So,
thank you. So, Laura, anything you want to add to now that you've heard these two on what they highlight as energy sources and cost?
No, it's great to hear and refreshing as well for myself to hear, operations really pushing forward in this and feeling more comfortable. And this is becoming a stable source. The economics are going to come down. That's I think a given, even though some of this is still going up, like the cost of energy. But I think by allowing kind of that give and again utilizing that existing infrastructure and finding people in the energy space, especially oil and gas, that have dealt with just the transport line in general, these transport solutions such as pipelines, mobile pipeline, kind of what you were just saying with trucking it in, they can really provide efficiency and effectiveness and really cut costs down in much more drastic ways when you start to really get into not the 1-800 numbers for the big oil and gas guys, but some of these small mid-sized guys that can really come in with their existing experience and they can dig into these for you and help on that, especially the cost side.
Well, thank you. So for the next question, you've got battery storage as being another component of this, and people are still trying to figure out how that's going to fit in. Is battery storage being considered for any one of your operations? And I'll start with Mike.
yeah, absolutely. So not just those terminals that I mentioned, but we are looking at ways, particularly on that new airport solar farm, to incorporate the best and brightest of battery storage, because that really helps everybody that can connect to the grid and to that power output. And both electric and we're finding hydrogen, can play a role in that space. So that's probably our largest single application that is smack dab, obviously, in one of the front doors of the airport itself. So, coupling that with, charging stations for vehicles makes a lot of sense. And we've been really working on the right place to do that. And, as well as integrated into our existing photovoltaic systems that we already have, and really being able to harness that power for the long term and have the variability to, get it online when it needs to be. So those are the most recent, but we're hearing there's a lot more that we can do, and I'm learning a lot as I go.
Good deal. Doran, anything on your end? Because you're pretty much a net zero facility, correct?
We're trying to move towards being a net zero facility, and we don't have the ability to generate enough solar power to fuel our fleet because we're big consumers of power. In the old days, we bought fuel as a commodity. You paid a certain amount per unit, have a good day, away you go. What we're finding now is we've really got to evolve our skill sets completely. And when you look at batteries, when you look at the way we use this technology, it's nowhere near simple. And I think that as transport operators, those are things we're going to have to work with our energy providers to really understand. How do we speak each other's language? How do we accomplish our common mission and do it in a way that we've never done it before? And that really is the challenge. We're looking at everything. We're looking at batteries. We're looking at all solutions that ultimately make economic sense. And at the end of the day, allow us to accomplish our mission. And that's the key. We've got to be able to get people where they need to go. All of the fuel technology issues have to support that core mission.
Great. So with that, Laura, anything on the battery storage you'd like to add? We got about 5 minutes left, and I want one more just closing remarks from each of you. Batteries
are great. I think it's a good balance to always have another option. And I think they're great for some of these smaller scale applications, but hydrogen's proving to really take place of batteries, and people are seeing it as a battery when You can have storage of it in large cylinders, on-site storage, deployable storage as well. But compressed hydrogen lasts really long time, which is nice, where batteries have to be replaced, have to be recharged. If it's too hot or cold, they're going to have issues, where the gas is a gas. So it really becomes a nice long-term solution and on-demand solution as a turn of a valve. So that's been more on my side of what people are moving into.
Thank you. So with that, I'm going to have you guys each do closing remarks, and then I'd like to say something in closing before we conclude at 1 o'clock. So I'll start with Laura, since I've gone with everybody first on the other ones. So Laura, any closing remarks?
First of all, thank you for inviting me on here. You and James have been incredible leaders in this space for quite some time. And having you guys still part of this has been exciting, and leading a lot of these different groups into the policy side, government side. It's much appreciated. So thank you. And I just look forward to seeing where this goes and how these collaborations continue.
Thank you. All right, Doran, anything you'd like to close out with?
Yeah. First, again, I'll also echo the thanks, Jerry, for being able to be part of the discussion today. I think we're in this period of rapid innovation, rapid evolution, rapid learning, and it's very exciting. It's sometimes very scary. There's a lot that we still need to figure out. The best way we're going to figure that out is by sharing our experiences, by sharing what worked, but also recognizing that in order to be successful, there have to be failures, and we need to celebrate that as well. Sometimes the best learnings come from the things that don't work the way we expected, because that informs how we go forward. So again, thanks for the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, again, Jerry, thank you for having us here, and being a part of a group of such talented folks. It's really vital to our continued success, because being the airport guy, we never get to sleep. The airport's always open, the lights always have to be on, and we got to be here to support the global flying public, which means we got to have as many options at our disposal to support not just the business environment here at the airport, but all of our partners and the traveling public. And we take that pretty seriously, but again, just really encouraged by the advancements, and look forward to working with a lot of new but equally talented, smart people. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to summarize basically all my conversations around all three of you as part of my summary. And I'm going to say, if there's anything I learned leaving, my former employer, Southern California Edison, and taking an opportunity to go to the Department of Energy, there's a couple things I learned. There's a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. The similarities is, God, there's a lot of hidden budgets I didn't realize are hidden until you start looking. So, and I don't mean that facetiously. I mean that the fact is the DOE is so big. No bigger, and there's so many budgets out there for what you guys are literally considering. It's how you package it and put it together. And the good thing is, before I left the DOE, I was able to learn a lot about the various technologies that can be applied and where the grants can possibly be for the stuff that you want, even with the Indian nations as well. So that's something to think about, because as you said, Doran, sometimes you have to fail, and I don't call it failure. I call it trying and just not reaching the goal, right? You fall a little bit short, and then you try again, but you learn from each one of those opportunities. So with that, with Mike, if there's something I'm learning on your side of the house, is you're open to all kinds of new innovation, which means it's a whole new gamut. But the other thing that posed a challenge for you is the challenge that I think is a national discussion. The grid right now, it was built just after post-World War II. There's a lot of modernization it has to be. There is in the infrastructure a lot of investment got to go in, but there's also got to be cleaner components as part of that investment as we build that transmission line out, as well as a smarter distribution system. So as you know, EV chargers is being pushed out and rolled out nationally, but here in Southern California, I think it's 38,000 is being pushed by Southern California Edison. The challenge you have there, that's just one focus. That should be built with a joint effort with hydrogen, maybe as an option. So as they're building the one trench, you're not cutting it twice in the future, 5 years from now. you're already laying in the groundwork for all the baseline infrastructure. So those should be coordinated, in my opinion. And then lastly, hydrogen. I think, you know, you have some elements here, Laura, that talk about costs. Hopefully those costs go down. So there can be those partnerships in those areas where you've got existing infrastructure and you can hopefully not have to build new infrastructure, but you can actually go in with the same pipeline that exists for some of these areas that have maybe dirtier energy, as they call it. So with that, I really do want to thank each and every one of you. It's 1 o'clock, and I'm going to turn it over to Alejandra and just say thank you all, and thank you, Alejandra, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Doran. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you so much, Mr. James. I really appreciate you guys took the time to participate at this amazing summit. This is a platform where we can show to the participants, to the world, the technology, the innovation, new opportunities, provide solutions. We have youth as well, where they're going to be able to start looking for a new companies, new opportunities, and just the fact to provide them this platform, they're going to find a better future for all of them. And also the fact that we're going to do networking, we're going to find a new connections, and also the opportunity that people know more about our products, about our companies, and how we can contribute for the environment, how we can show new ways to create jobs, create opportunities in a renewable industry. I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for participating at the World Green Growth Summit 2021. Thank you, and have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. All right.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye now.